Hey everyone, my name is Chris and I'm a surgical registrar in Australia, and today I want to talk to you about one of the most common questions that I get on this channel and on all of my other social media accounts, which is how do I become a doctor and how do I get into medical school? It's a really complex topic, and so today what I want to do is break it down in a comprehensive but simple way so that if that's what you're looking to do, then you have a starting point for how to orientate yourself to the process in Australia. So there's one caveat to this video, which is that the process does change quite often. So this might date a little bit depending on when you're watching it. And the second thing is that it's only specific to this country because I haven't gone through the process anywhere else. And so all I can provide advice about is here. But if you're interested in Australia, then this is how you might go about it. The first thing to be aware of is that there are 19 medical schools that take admissions each year, and each medical school is a little bit different in the way that they approach it. Some take only postgraduate entry students, some take only undergraduate entry students, some take a combination of the two, and some have an accelerated undergraduate program that you can get into. So it's worth investigating each individual school for their actual requirements and not assuming that just because you're qualified for one, that you're going to be qualified to apply to another. And vice versa. An easy way to think about it though is, am I going to apply as a postgraduate or am I going to apply as an undergraduate, and therefore what options are available to me? So if you're applying as an undergraduate, there's three things that you're going to have to take into consideration. The first is, what are your high school results and what prerequisite subjects do you need to do in high school to make yourself eligible, depending on the university that you're applying to. The second thing is, what is your UCAT result, or your University Clinical Aptitude Test result? This is a standardized test that high school students can sit to grade themselves relative to each other, and for universities to moderate who they're going to offer interviews to and who they're not going to offer interviews to. And the third thing is, how well are you going to perform on an interview and what's involved in that? And so taking into consideration those three components is going to be critical in making you eligible to apply to an undergraduate medical program. Now, there is at least one program in Australia that's sort of an exception to the rule, and that's James Cook University. If you apply to James Cook, then you don't need to have sat the UCAT in order to be offered an interview there. But the program is pretty heavily focused towards rural and tropical medicine, and so if you come from a rural background, or you have a really strong interest in rural medicine or tropical medicine and you can demonstrate that, then you have a better chance of getting a position at that particular undergraduate program. But it's kind of the exception, so it's not necessarily worth preparing yourself solely for undergraduate entry on the basis of that. It's just good to know that it's an option if it's something that you're interested in. Now, the second main path of entry into medical programs is through the postgraduate pathway. So what does that mean? It means essentially, one, you need a good enough GPA at your university degree, that is your undergraduate degree, in order to be eligible. And different universities have different rankings based on their relative popularity at the time. The second thing is that you need to have sat the GAMSAT or the MCAT, which essentially are the graduate entries equivalents of the UCAT test that high school students sit. Just a very different structure and type. And if you want to know a little bit more about how to prepare for that, then I've got some other videos on that topic. But this is essentially a standardized test that again allows people to be ranked. And then the third aspect of it is, much like the undergraduate pathway, there's the interview. And so if you have a sufficient GPA and you score sufficiently well on the GAMSAT or the MCAT, then you'll be offered an interview. And a lot of those are multi-mini station interview structured approaches to selection. And that's a topic sort of all to itself, which hopefully I'll be able to do a video on in the future. But those are the three components of postgraduate entry, and that's probably by far the most common way in which people enter medicine, at least at the moment. So that's all great in theory, but how did it work in practice for me? So when I finished high school, I had a score that was sufficient to get into medicine from a overall position, or I guess what you would call an ATAR today. But I didn't know if I wanted to do medicine, so I went and did a humanities degree instead, and in fact started studying law and diplomacy and international relations. And so by the time I decided that I wanted to get into medicine, my high school grades didn't count for anything, and I hadn't sat the UCAT because I wasn't thinking about clinical practice at that time. So I went through the postgraduate pathway, and what that involved was me essentially getting my GPA up to the level that was required in order to be eligible, and then sitting the GAMSAT, which was pretty challenging coming from a non-science background, and required me going back and doing adult learning school to re-establish my knowledge basis in chemistry and physics in particular, so that I would be at a competitive level for that exam. So I sat the GAMSAT twice. On my first attempt I wasn't successful. On my second attempt I had a score that was high enough in conjunction with my GPA to be offered an interview. And so I sat an interview at Griffith University, and then I was accepted into the medical program there. And I completed medicine at that university, and I've worked in surgery ever since. So you can see that even if you decide later in life that you want to go into medical school, there's definitely a pathway available to you. It just sometimes takes a little bit extra work. But I hope that's motivational for you guys who are starting out maybe a little bit later and, like me, deciding to come to medicine from a different direction as opposed to just high school. But if that's what you're interested in, and that's the way that you'd like to go, then there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just about knowing what options are available and then preparing yourself so that you're eligible to take advantage of them. So I know this is just a brief overview, but I hope it's really helpful for those of you who've just been feeling a little bit lost with where you sit in the picture and what are the different steps that are required. Now, if there's any more information that you'd like about those individual steps, let me know, and I'm more than happy to do videos on those for those who are interested. But until next time, enjoy the work and best of luck with your applications.